And Linda Barker offers more inspirational ideas and styling secrets to help transform your home in this new BBC book.
Reasons your heart rate increases.
Severe anxiety.
An nasty shock.
Overexcitement. Emotional conflict.
A sudden rush of adrenaline.
Hi, I'm Mr. Adams.
Holby City. Pulses are racing. Thursday at 8 on BBC One.
You can see our camera taking a bit of a battering. 30 volt is the meat in the sandwich. Breathtaking, unbelievable racing. Super move there by Darren Lindsay. Michael Swan is the leader. McCurdy leads.
Brilliant coverage of the final rounds of the National Championships. Bikes, tonight at 11:15 on BBC One.
The 9 o'clock news now on BBC One with Peter Sissons.
William Hague backs off from Anne Widdecombe's hardline policy on cannabis. He says, let's see if anyone's got any better ideas. The peace process on a knife edge as Israel's ultimatum to Arafat runs out. And don't all rush at once. Won't anyone say he wants to manage England? Good evening. One of the main planks of the Conservatives' new policy on drugs has lasted less than a week. Launched last Wednesday by the Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe, who promised zero tolerance towards cannabis users, the policy has been rejected by senior policemen and the government's drug supremo. A further embarrassing blow fell when 7 members of the Shadow Cabinet came out as former users of the drug. William Hague now says the policy needs further consultation. This from our political correspondent, John Pienaar.
The Tories had rolled out a new drugs policy. Trouble was, they didn't all want to inhale. So today it was up to William Hague to explain whether his party really wanted zero tolerance of drugs. Some shadow ministers had helpfully admitted smoking cannabis. Others instinctively dislike a law that many people choose to ignore. What started as firm policy ended up a basis for consultation.
Let's see if anybody has any better ideas. Let's go out to the police officers, to the teachers, to the parents, to drug rehabilitation workers, and have a further consultation, discussion, debate. Let's have an honest debate about this in this country.
Today's headlines were grim for the Tories, chaos, U-turn, but Mr. Hague was looking on the bright side.
Funnily enough, I think we're getting some credit in this, and I've seen some credit in today's newspapers, for causing the debate, for saying, let's talk about this in this country.
Now, don't let him get run over, please.
Just about all Anne Widdecombe needed today was to run over a tabloid paper's sniffer dog. Was she really trying to start a debate when she promised zero tolerance of any drug? Last week in Bournemouth, it didn't sound like it.
If you are caught in possession of drugs, there will be no more turning of blind eyes, no more issuing just a caution. You will face for a first offence a minimum of a fixed penalty of a £100 fine.
But if there's an open debate now, ministers are mostly happy to keep their distance, content to watch the Tories run into trouble. Should cannabis be criminalised?
OK.
Even the famously chatty Minister for Drugs Policy was too busy to talk.
Sorry, John, no. I don't want to be late, babe.
Labour's standing on its policy that cannabis is against the law. It's about scoring party points. Even when asked the fashionable question, did you ever smoke?
Well, I haven't. I don't think that, however, is the issue. The issue is whether you have a decent policy for dealing with the problems of drugs in our society, and it's quite clear that the Conservative policy has not stood the test of time. In fact, it hasn't stood the test of 2 days.
But outside politics, there's increasing pressure from respected figures to consider whether it's time to legalise cannabis.
There's no good reason for cannabis to be on the illegal side of the legal-illegal drugs line. It's less harmful than alcohol, it's less harmful than tobacco. It ought to be in a regulated system of supply.
The real argument about soft drugs isn't just taking place on the fringes of society. The use of cannabis has grown more widespread. Public opinion has grown more tolerant. Those Tories who are enjoying Anne Widdecombe's embarrassment have to face the fact that this hasn't been a triumph for their party. They didn't need this, just as William Hague was trying to build a political recovery. But for better or worse, whether they meant to or not, the debate has been opened up. And ironically, it's the Conservatives who have broken down one of the great taboos of politics. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
And our political editor, Andrew Marr, joins us from Westminster now. Andrew, how damaging is it when a politician has to canvass improvements, suggestions how to improve a policy when it's hardly a week old?
Well, I think the minute a politician as senior as William Hague starts to say, let's have a consultation exercise, you know they're in trouble. If they really don't know what to do, they call for a national debate. And if they don't think they're ever going to know what to do, they call for a royal commission.
Why haven't politicians of all parties kicked this into touch with the Royal Commission? They could say goodbye to it for 2 or 3 years and get on with doing the things they perhaps would prefer to talk about.
Well, I think perhaps some of them remember Harold Wilson's famous dictum that Royal Commissions take minutes and waste years. I think more likely nobody really wants to have this debate. One of the things that we can ask ourselves tonight is what does more damage to British politics? The revelation that 20 years ago 7 members of the Shadow Cabinet smoked the odd joint, or the revelation that tonight, when admittedly under a great deal of pressure, the Leader of the Opposition, William Hague, calls for a serious and honest national debate. Members of all parties, with the honourable exception of Charles Kennedy, run from the microphones. They're nowhere to be seen. Members of the Cabinet who will privately say we must take a serious and adult line on drugs, when they're actually faced with the possibility of discussing this in public, are too frightened to do so.
Are you saying that the government are getting no pleasure out of Mr Hague's discomfiture?
Oh, they're getting a great deal of pleasure out of Mr Hague's discomfiture. They're enjoying every minute of it, and the Conservatives are in real problems. It's very hard to see what kind of policy William Hague can come up with in his election manifesto that's going to crack down on users of drugs, as he promises, without actually running foul of the kind of legal and electoral problems they've had this week. Nonetheless, although the government can enjoy this, they can also perhaps reflect on the fact that they haven't been able to move the debate forward 1 inch tonight.
Andrew Marr, thank you. The UN Secretary-General arrived in the Middle East tonight, saying his mission was to stop the killing and prevent the conflict from spreading. But the peace process remains on the brink of collapse. Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Barak has given the Palestinians a deadline to stop fighting by tonight or face what he calls forceful action. At least 2 more Palestinians have died on the West Bank today. Dozens more have been injured. Around 90 have now died in 12 days of unrest.
The Palestinians have been warned to call off their uprising by tonight, but this was their answer to the Israelis, a hail of rocks in Ramallah on the West Bank. Young boys join in what's being called the new intifada, and sometimes women too. On this occasion, the rioters are forced to retreat, but they say they won't be threatened by Israel's ultimatums and deadlines. They feel they have little to lose by fighting and little to gain from a peace process now on the brink of collapse. They flaunt pictures of the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, and some call on him to attack Israel. In the meantime, the Palestinians use their catapults and their slingshots. Bucket loads of ammunition are brought up to the front line, but many told me what they really want are guns, so they can turn this crisis into a war.
Now we have stones, but tomorrow maybe have guns.
You want to have guns to fight them with?
Yes, we ask all the Arab countries give us guns because they want to take our lands and we must stop them. So we need the Arab and Islamic world to help us and give us soldiers and guns.
The Israeli security forces have no shortage of guns, but now the 2 sides who were until so recently partners in peace are facing each other across the barricades. More than 90 people are dead, the vast majority of them Palestinians. The Israeli Prime Minister's tough ultimatum means that this has been a make-or-break day for the peace process. And on the evidence here in Ramallah, at least, it is well and truly broken, and it's going to take a very long time indeed to fix. If there is a repairman, then maybe it's the United Nations Secretary-General, Kofi Annan. He's now in Israel and trying initially to stop a slide into war.
Our first objective is clear. The action must shift from the streets to the bargaining table. The bloodshed must stop, and the conflict must not be allowed to spread. Time is short, the stakes are high. The price for failure is more than any one of us wants to pay.
He's heading straight to Gaza to meet the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. But even if Mr. Arafat agrees to stop the uprising, there are question marks over whether he can, whether it has spun beyond his control. Nighttime firefights like this one in Hebron have suddenly become commonplace. Among both Israelis and Palestinians, there is a rising tide of anger, fear and hatred. Frantic diplomatic efforts are now underway to ease this crisis. The fear is they may be too late. Ben Brown, BBC News on the West Bank.
And I'm joined from Jerusalem by our Middle East correspondent Paul Adams. What's going on there now, Paul, now that the Barak ultimatum has expired?
You're right, it has expired, and as you've just heard in Ben Brown's package, the violence continues. We are getting reports this evening of sporadic clashes. Nighttime clashes, often involving live ammunition, have been very much a feature of the past week or so, and at the moment there's no sign that it's stopping.
Would you expect any strong-arm response from Israel before they at least give Kofi Annan a chance?
No evidence of that yet, though there are reports of Israeli heavy armour reinforcing some of the positions where they've already been in the last few days. I think Ehud Barak will stay his hand, at least while Kofi Annan is in the area. It has to be said, though, that the Israelis are no great fans of UN representatives. They do not believe, I think, that the UN represents a credible negotiating partner, and this is, after all, the boss of an organization that only a couple of days ago accused the Israelis of using excessive force in putting down these demonstrations. So I think the fact that Mr. Barak has not scheduled a meeting with Kofi Annan until tomorrow suggests that he's a little skeptical, to say the least.
And it's rumoured that President Clinton may come to Cairo to chair a last-ditch summit. Would Arafat attend that? What difference would it make having Clinton in the region?
I'm sure Mr. Arafat would attend such a meeting. I think it would be hard to resist it. I think President Clinton must be in two minds. Here is a man whose commitment to the Middle East peace process is not in question. He's devoted an awful lot of time and energy to it during his presidency. But this year he's already had two summits, one with the Syrian president, ex-Syrian president Hafez al-Assad in Geneva earlier in the year. That failed. Then the momentous Camp David summit in July involving Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat. That came close to doing a deal, but that failed too. Is President Clinton, at the very end of his term in office, going to risk another failure?
Paul Adams in Jerusalem, thank you. In the past hour, the BBC has won the right to broadcast a panorama programme tonight, which names suspects it alleges were involved in the Omagh bombing. The High Court in Belfast ruled in favour of the BBC in a case brought by the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. The programme confronts several suspects about their movements on the day of the bombing in August 1998. The BBC says the programme, which goes out on BBC One at 10 o'clock tonight, is in the public interest. There have been further top-level political changes in Yugoslavia, with events moving quickly following last week's ousting of Slobodan Milosevic. Two key allies of Mr. Milosevic have resigned, and the Serbian parliament has voted to dissolve itself and hold new elections in December. The new president, Vojislav Kostunica, received another boost from the European Union, which lifted virtually all the sanctions imposed on Serbia over the last 2 years. First, the political changes. From our World Affairs editor in Belgrade, John Simpson.
Payback time has begun. Inside the Serbian parliament, the members nervously voted for their own dissolution. Outside, the people who brought down Slobodan Milosevic were waiting for them. Waiting in particular for the tall man with glasses, Vojislav Šešelj, President Milosevic's political ally and a ferocious supporter of the wars and ethnic cleansing which Milosevic unleashed. Now Šešelj's bodyguards think he's in real danger. One of them fires in the air. The Milosevic years have been years of violence and thuggery, and private armies have become the norm. Tonight, Vojislav Šešelj needs his private army badly. Fascist, they shout at him as he hurries away. A lot of these demonstrators are supporters of the Red Star Belgrade football team. They played a big part in the revolution, and they don't yet think it's all over. Nor do the employees of the Belgrade Intercontinental Hotel. They're bringing us in by the back way to witness their showdown with the boss of the big state corporation which owns the hotel. The boss's bodyguards stopped us going in the front way, and now they want to throw us out. The employees don't agree. It's all too much for Radoman Bojovic, who of course is another crony of President Milosevic. The hotel's only one part of his empire. His company, Genex, is the biggest in Serbia. He ran it in Milosevic's interests and his own, and the staff, outrageously underpaid, are hitting back. When he reaches his headquarters nearby, he finds the staff there are in rebellion too. The years of timidity are well and truly over. This accountant told me Bojovic sold the company plain last month, kept half the money and gave the rest to President Milosevic.
Should he be put on trial?
Yes, I think so. He must be.
By now they've forced him to write out his resignation. Some of these people earn £5 a month. He's a millionaire. And like so many others, he'll probably escape abroad with the money.
It may not be justice, it may not be fair, but it's what always does seem to happen after revolutions. They'll get away with it. But as long as some, at least, of the top people are put on trial and found guilty, that should be enough to assuage the need for revenge among most people. John Simpson, BBC News, Belgrade.
The European Union not only moved swiftly to remove sanctions imposed against Serbia, but also promised financial aid of more than £200 million to help with the country's reconstruction. The EU approved a number of measures, including the removal of the oil embargo and the resumption of commercial flights. But financial and visa restrictions will be lifted when the EU is satisfied that the deposed president and his associates won't benefit. Gavin Hewitt reports from Novi Sad, just north of Belgrade, on the impact that the lifting of these sanctions will have.
Novi Sad, symbol of a ruined country. Its bridges were bombed by NATO last year, and the Danube, a vital artery for this society, remains blocked. And sanctions imposed by the West have crippled the economy. Goran Antunovic is a captain of a barge. With the river closed to most boats, 3/4 of his colleagues are having to survive on a minimum wage of £3 a month. Today was special for him. Most sanctions were lifted. It's a big relief, he said. We're beginning a new life, joining the rest of Europe where we belong. The first dividend of life without Milosevic will be that the fuel embargo will be lifted, ending not only the queues at the filling stations, but providing oil for Serbian industry. The markets reveal what a Spartan place this has become. Since sanctions were imposed, imports from Yugoslavia's main trading partners are down 1/3. And one other consequence, the growth of smuggling and the black market.
We had almost complete criminalization of the economy and of great part of our society.
European foreign ministers also agreed today to provide over £200 million to help the damaged infrastructure and to clear the waters of the Danube. One sanction not being lifted immediately is on the movement of financial assets. There is a fear that those close to former President Milosevic will plunder government accounts and move money out of the country. There is some evidence that since last week's uprising, that has already happened. You can still see here vehicles, windows blacked out, bodyguards inside, the means of travel of the old elite who control much of the economy. Last week, at least £30 million were transferred abroad illegally. And in at least one office, financial records were burnt. Students tonight were still celebrating their victory over Milosevic. But the shadow of the former president and his circle continues to fall across the economy. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Belgrade.
The Lockerbie bombing trial has been adjourned for a week after the prosecution said it had received new information from a foreign government. 2 Libyans are being tried by a Scottish court sitting in the Netherlands. They deny killing 270 people by planting a bomb on Pan Am Flight 103, which blew up over Lockerbie in 1988. The Basque separatist terrorist group ETA has been blamed for another murder, this time one of southern Spain's chief prosecutors. Luis Portero was shot dead in the city of Granada. The Spanish authorities believe ETA has killed at least 12 people since it called off its ceasefire in December. The England football team has arrived in Finland for Wednesday's World Cup qualifying game. While the players try to concentrate on the match with temporary coach Howard Wilkinson, off the pitch the focus is on who will replace the departed Kevin Keegan.
Howard Wilkinson hasn't enjoyed the smoothest of build-ups for an international match. Parachuted in as caretaker manager after a resignation and a defeat, and now in charge of a squad depleted by injury. It's a pretty miserable send-off for a team that's endured a pretty miserable few days. Once the game's over in Helsinki, then the FA will start scouring far and wide for a successor to Kevin Keegan. At the centre of the storm, the Football Association, now criticised for picking Kevin Keegan in the first place and engulfed by speculation about his successor.
What we are seeking to do is to get the best person for the job, and we will do that over the next few weeks, and we will take as long as it takes. There are a number of candidates, I understand, who are ruling themselves out and ruling themselves in.
Most of them spent today ruling themselves out. Arsene Wenger of Arsenal was said by his chairman to be too sensible to take the job. France's World Cup winner Aimé Jacquet said no thanks. And Newcastle United's Bobby Robson says he's happy where he is. Peter Taylor of Leicester City says he's flattered but unavailable.
I just feel at the moment the England thing may be a bit too soon for myself. I'm absolutely loving it here at Leicester City, and so I'd really like to end all that speculation.
Keeping a low profile for once is the firm favourite Terry Van. In Finland tonight, the stand-in coach was with his stand-in captain Martin Keown and talking about his own task ahead.
You know, if you happen on my CV sometime, you'll find that none of the starts, as a player or as a coach, I've never dropped into the pot of gold. So I'm quite used to starting at the bottom of the hole, digging my way out of it.
The players at their team hotel know the job of lifting the gloom over English football is largely down to them. Victory in Helsinki would be a good start. James Helm, BBC News.
Railtrack says it's missed its performance improvement targets for the second year running. Delays are up by 10% in the past 6 months. The company blames the amount of construction work being carried out to upgrade tracks.
A string of delays in Leeds this morning put 3 major commuter lines out of action in the rush hour, all because weekend work to revamp the city's station failed to finish in time. It took regular commuter Keith Renshaw an hour longer than normal to get to his job in a city centre newsagent's. He wasn't impressed.
Appalling. We could at least have been kept informed on the train. Every time we approached the signal, we stopped at red and just stopped there. No apology again why and how long we're going to be.
For Railtrack, what should be good news is generating bad publicity. The company's £1 billion improvement programme is partly responsible for the 10% increase in delays.
And I do apologise that it might cause some short-term problems, and of course the safety is the big priority as well. But we've got to do better.
And the weather hasn't helped either. It was a wet spring and there was heavy rain in July that affected signals and points. But should it affect passengers?
We don't live in an extreme climate, and Railtrack should have been able to cope better with what was a wet summer, but it wasn't floods, it wasn't that bad.
Work at Euston Station's nearly finished. It too has upset train services. 6 months of disruption leaves Railtrack facing big penalty payments. The rail regulator will decide how much, but unless things improve, the final bill will top £35 million. So Railtrack will have to balance the long-term benefits of work like this with the short-term disruption it causes. It's shaping up to be one of the biggest challenges facing the company, and getting it wrong will mean upsetting passengers even more. Tom Simons, BBC News, Euston Station.
A senior judge at the High Court says he's concerned over the use on the roads of motorised scooters called go-peds. Some magistrates have cleared riders of motoring prosecutions brought by the police, while others have convicted people of identical charges because the go-peds were classed as motor vehicles.
Michael Saddington was riding a friend's motorised scooter. He ended up charged with driving while disqualified and without insurance. But magistrates decided the machine wasn't a motor vehicle under the law, so the Middlesbrough man was cleared.
Well, it's an unfortunate incident, really. It's that what started out as just a bit of fun, getting on this thing, has escalated to me being used as a test case down in London, which it's not very nice having this shadow over me.
The police challenged his acquittal. The High Courts reserved judgment on Mr. Saddington's case and will decide whether such scooters should in fact be classed as motor vehicles. That'll determine whether riders can be charged with motoring offences. Mr. Saddington's lawyer says magistrates are confused. Another 400 prosecutions are in the pipeline.
The difficulty is there is not a consistent approach throughout the country, and there has to be a definitive ruling that all courts can follow so that people are treated equally in respect of the same offence.
You've got a back brake. On this model here, you can also get...
Manufacturers do recommend against road use, and if these scooters are classed as motor vehicles, they'd be illegal on the road because they don't have lights or good enough brakes. Police want them banned.
The riders are very vulnerable. They are unstable. It's like a child's scooter. You're trying to balance on it, and any other vehicle going past, just the draft from them could blow them off and cause themselves injuries.
And they're definitely illegal on pavements, so the scope for riding them could soon be very restricted. However this case ends up, these motorised mini-scooters really don't seem the most sensible thing for regular travel to work or the shops. The manufacturers say they're not for street use, and perhaps they would best be left for having fun on private land. Simon Montague, BBC News in Middlesbrough.
And the main news tonight, William Hague has backed off from the hardline policy on cannabis announced only last week by the Shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe. The next news is on BBC News 24 at 10 o'clock, but from the 9 o'clock news.